Commentary on Romans 3:21 to 31. Romans 3:21 to 31 marks one of the great turning points in Paul's letter. After demonstrating that both Jews and Gentiles stood guilty before God under sin, Paul announces the good news with the words, "But now." This passage reveals that God's righteousness has been manifested through Jesus Christ, apart from the Mosaic law, fulfilling God's ancient promises and establishing a new covenant reality. Romans 3, verse 21. But now the righteousness of God without the law is manifested, being witnessed by the law and the prophets. The phrase, "but now," signals a new era in God's redemptive plan. The righteousness of God is not something people achieve through obedience to the law of Moses. Instead, it has been revealed through Christ's finished work. Paul does not say the law was wrong. Rather, the law and the prophets pointed toward this very revelation. The sacrifices, priesthood, feasts, and covenant promises anticipated a greater reality that would come through the Messiah. The righteousness God provides stands apart from the old covenant system while fulfilling everything it anticipated. Romans 3:22. Even the righteousness of God, which is by faith of Jesus Christ unto all and upon all them that believe. Righteousness is God's gift rather than humanity's accomplishment. Faith is the means by which people receive what Christ has accomplished. Paul removes every distinction between Jew and Gentile. Covenant blessings are no longer restricted by ethnic identity or adherence to the ceremonial law. Everyone who believes shares equally in Christ's righteousness. Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Paul summarizes humanity's condition. Jews possessed the law, while Gentiles had conscience and creation as witnesses, yet all failed to attain God's glory. This verse levels every human distinction. Religious heritage, personal morality, and good works cannot bridge the gap between humanity and God. Romans 3:24. Being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. Justification is a legal declaration that sinners are righteous before God. It is given freely and cannot be earned. Redemption carries the idea of liberation through payment. Christ's death accomplished what the old sacrificial system could only foreshadow. The repeated sacrifices under the old covenant anticipated the one perfect sacrifice that would secure eternal redemption. Grace excludes boasting because salvation originates entirely with God. Romans 3:25, whom God hath set forth to be a propitiation through faith in his blood. Christ is the true mercy seat where God and humanity meet. Under the old covenant, the high priest entered the most holy place once each year to sprinkle blood upon the mercy seat. Paul presents Jesus as the fulfillment of that entire system. His sacrifice demonstrates God's justice. God did not ignore sin, but dealt with it completely through Christ. The temporary coverings provided under the Old Covenant find their permanent fulfillment in the cross. Romans 3, verse 26. To declare, I say, at this time his righteousness, that he might be just and the justifier of him which believeth in Jesus. God remains perfectly just while declaring believers righteous. The cross resolves the apparent tension between God's holiness and his mercy. Justice is satisfied because sin has been judged, and mercy triumphs because sinners are forgiven. Faith does not persuade God to be gracious. Faith simply receives the grace God has already provided through Christ. Romans 3, verse 27. Where is boasting then? It is excluded. Human pride has no place in salvation. The Jew could not boast in possession of the law. The Gentile could not boast in personal wisdom or morality. Since righteousness comes through faith rather than works, all glory belongs to God. The principle of faith removes every ground for self-righteousness. Romans 3:28. Therefore, we conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. This is one of Paul's clearest statements concerning justification. The deeds of the law include the covenant obligations that marked Israel under Moses. Circumcision, sacrifices, dietary regulations, and every aspect of covenant membership cannot produce righteousness. Faith rests in Christ's completed work rather than human performance. The believer standing before God depends entirely upon Jesus. Romans 3, verse 29 to 30. Is he the God of the Jews only? Is he not also of the Gentiles? God's plan always extended beyond Israel. The promises made to Abraham anticipated blessing for all nations. Through Christ, the dividing wall between Jew and Gentile is removed. There is one God and one way of justification. Jews and Gentiles stand on equal ground before him. The gospel creates one covenant family united in Christ. Romans 3:31. Do we then make void the law through faith? God forbid. Yea, we establish the law. Faith does not destroy the law's purpose. The law exposed sin, revealed God's holiness, and pointed toward the coming Messiah. Christ fulfilled its types, shadows, sacrifices, priesthood, and covenant promises. Faith establishes the law because it recognizes that God's redemptive plan has reached its intended goal in Christ. The law's testimony is vindicated because everything it anticipated has been accomplished. The larger theme of Romans 3:21-31. Paul presents a dramatic contrast between two covenant realities. The old covenant revealed sin but could not perfect the worshiper. It relied upon repeated sacrifices and pointed forward to something greater. In Christ, God's righteousness has been fully revealed. Forgiveness is complete. Justification is freely given. Redemption has been accomplished. Jew and Gentile are united in one family through faith. The chapter declares that humanity's greatest need has been met by God's greatest gift. Righteousness is not achieved through striving, but received through trusting the one who fulfilled God's promises. Romans 3:21-31 stands as a declaration that God's saving plan, foretold throughout the scriptures, has reached its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. Through him, God remains perfectly just while freely justifying all who believe, bringing the old order of shadows to its intended completion and establishing a new covenant founded upon grace, faith, and the finished work of the Messiah.